And I'm here with Richard Hardy. How you doing, Richard?
Doing well, Brian. It's a lovely day today. Ready to get into some of these topics that we have, but I think we got to do some housekeeping first.
Yeah, we'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors because without them, these broadcasts would not be possible. Ultimate Financial Taxes and Insurance Services, creating a strategy to keep your money in your pocket. For more information, call 875-6293, 702-875-6293. Ultimate Financial Tax and Insurance Services. We have MyMobile. MyMobile, save money and create value. Free technology reviews by MyMobile. 708-805-3819. And we have Clark County Heating and Cooling. Summer is coming, folks. There are PM specials available through the Clark County Heating and Cooling. And last but not least, Black Book Media. We reach our community. The Independent Black Voters, The Bob Show, The Black Book, and of course, the Black Las Vegas Food Festival and Block Party 2020 on October 24th. Be there. So folks, we got an exciting time here to talk about some things that are important to our community. The Independent Black Voters Speak. We'd like to be a voice for the voiceless. We want to be the people that talk about the issues that they don't want to talk about. So today we're going to talk about an issue that is near and dear to us. It says politics is big business, but they treat black people like a nonprofit.
That's big right there because we see a lot of things that's happening in politics, especially in 2020, but they treat the black people like nonprofits. So let's dive into this, Brian. I mean, I see we have an outline of things that we need to hit first, but I think it's going to get interesting with this one, folks.
Absolutely. Here are a couple of things to think about, folks. Some facts that we know. The black community, we're one of the most loyal groups to the Democratic Party. Ever since the 1960s, when the Civil Rights Movement came into place, we have consistently voted Democrat, with over 90% of our voting going to Democrats. So I'd say we're one of the most, if not the most loyal partner to the Democratic Party. But the question is, we're loyal to them, but are they really loyal to us? And here comes the facts. The black community overall makes up about 12% of the populace. And we usually determine the outcome of the presidential election. We're a swing vote. You know, right now, we kind of do this. We either come out and mobilize, we vote, the Democratic Party wins. Or we stay home and the Democratic Party loses. So we are that swing vote that really determines the outcome of the presidential election when it comes to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because there was a lot of money spent to keep us home in the last election.
You're absolutely right, Brian. I mean, I'm looking at the topics as we go through it, and to keep us home in the last election, we're talking about jury selection.
Yep.
Moving districts around to move the numbers around to garnish the votes. I mean, that's a creative way to do it, but it's right in front of your face. And we saw that happen last time. And we're on point this time to make sure it doesn't happen. And there's a lot of watchdog groups out there that's looking, but you never say never with things when it comes to like politics, and especially when the topic that we're talking about is money as it involves politics, and it impacts the black community in certain ways, especially with the I'm going to go ahead and jump into this one because Brian probably going to pick right up on that fact. And another bullet point that we want to talk about is that political estimate that $10 billion will be spent in the presidential election alone.
That's a lot, Brady.
That's a lot. I didn't say million, I said 10 billion with a B. And what that means is, you know, we see a lot of advertising, print media, social media, and that money goes out to people, and we want to talk about where's it going.
Absolutely. Politics is big business. A lot of companies, a lot of media, they sit fat for the whole year and the next year just off of the political money that's spent in this crazy times. They're able to bring in cash, they're able to support, build their businesses. The presidential election is not political, it is big business. And unfortunately, as we said in the statement, they treat us like a nonprofit. Unfortunately, their expectations of the black community is, let me give you something that is non-transactional to vote for us. And that's a shame. Facts you talk about. While the black people, as you said, we're 13% of the populace, we vote 90% of times Democratic. But while $10 billion has been spent, less than 1% of those financial resources will be spent in black-owned businesses. And folks, I'm not talking about white urban media. I'm talking about black-owned radio stations, black-owned printing, black-owned media, social media. Basically, unfortunately, while the party needs our vote, they are not putting their money where their mouth is.
And that's true, because I mean, I can count, well, I know there's black-owned print, black-owned media throughout the country. And I don't think the lion's share of that work is going towards those businesses. And I ask myself why. I mean, we know when they come to the churches, we're in there.
Yeah, and that's just, we're going to talk about why, because there are a lot of reasons, and it kind of goes back to the whole bailiwick of, we need to be talking about these issues, and we need to be setting our own agenda, because when we don't set our agenda, we end up with what we end up now. Here's a fact. One of the reasons is, I guess here's a fact. Many of the politicians have taken up the mantle of equity, of wealth equity. And they talk about certain issues in the black community. They've made some promises. A lot of times their promises are not necessarily what the business black man would see as a focal point. It's unfortunately things that they have been told by non-businessmen to talk about to our communities. And I'm going to use a quick example. When you look at where they spend the money, we're told certain issues, like the consultants come in and they put out these information. They say, what is the biggest concern of black people? They're told, well, it's to get Donald Trump out of office. So they believe that our biggest concern with politicians is to get Donald Trump out of office. Non-transactional, folks. So they say, all we have to do is tell the black community that we're going to get Donald Trump out, and we don't have to spend any money. We don't have to earn their vote. We just have to get Donald Trump. But when you look at things like the black census, which clearly states that the belief of independent black voters that just happen to vote Democratic believe that the majority of the candidates do not know what we want. And so therefore, they're utilizing the same old adages. Let me go to the church. Let me talk about minimum wage. Let me talk about reparations, which is that old. But let me stick to the script with Black America, even though it's not our script, it's theirs.
And when they go, I mean, they come into the churches. They know that's what the numbers are. But they're ignoring the business community, many of the areas when they come to these churches. I mean, how many businesses are they going and striking deals? And like saying, we know you a small print shop. We have pamphlets and print media that needs to go out. How many deals of those are stricken?
And I can tell you none, and here's why. Transactional. The union supports the Democratic Party because they have transactional agreements. Most of us don't realize that there are agreements that most of their marketing material, their printing material, has to be done through a union shop. Well, you know what? That's a transactional agreement between the union that gives them the reason financially to support the Democratic Party. But think about it. The most loyal group, i.e. black people, the majority of our print shops are not union. We're small. We can't afford it. But you locked us out of that opportunity simply because it was a transaction for another group. And it's a negative transaction for us, but we simply don't know about it and realize we are in some way supporting our demise.
So you're saying that by not being the small business that we see, that I'm seeing, and that you're talking about, that we're talking about on this show, the small black business owner that may have a print shop or a media shop, if it's not union, they're not going to strike a deal with them?
Absolutely, because those are some of those agreements that are made, transactional agreements, i.e. money agreements that get their support. And unfortunately, when they talk to us, they'll talk about social justice, they'll talk about minimum wage even, which I don't
So
agree
let's back
with.
up. Well, I mean, because we know that's like going to be a lightning rod in the black community is social justice. It's permanent. I mean, we've been living it all our life, but financially, how does it equate on the exchange?
Well, it's interesting because I'm going to give you a statement. We just celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday, and I've spent a lot of time looking at some of his old clips and discussions. And he talked about an issue that I found interesting. He said that, the federal government supported the first wave of civil rights because it was non-transactional. They said, yeah, they helped us sit at a counter, which literally took money out of black businesses and put it in other people's businesses. They supported the right to vote because they were non-transactional, i.e. no money was flowing out. But when Martin Luther King started to talk about the war on poverty, which would require billions of dollars of investment back in that day, that's when they basically went the other way. And this is the same example if you look now with the political parties that be both the Democrats and Republicans, but especially the Democrats because they get our votes. You look at the fact, how can you tell me you have a black agenda? How can you tell me you have an agenda that will give economic equity and economic opportunity to black folks, but when you get to hold the billion-dollar purse strings, less than 1% of your dollar spent is in our community? You're hypocrites. You need to spend your money in black media. It should be in some kind of correlation with the amount of people, with everything else going on here, because guess what? If you are not reaching our community through our media, and a lot of times you aren't even reaching our media, our community.
I mean, backing up, you were talking about the union versus the non-union workforce.
Yeah.
And the jobs are not coming there. But our votes are going there.
Absolutely.
So our votes don't matter on the exchange. I can see union members getting in there and voting a certain way because they probably say, okay, we're going to support this candidate and union 1, 2, 3, ABC or whatever you want to call it. We're going to support them. They're going to have to be huge numbers. Same thing that we see in the churches. Our votes move one way, but what do we get in exchange? So you're saying they get in exchange because they may be that union print shop that go one way, or a union member, part of that group, and in exchange they get the work and they get the vote and they get the work, but we give our vote and we get what?
Because they have an agenda, and theirs is a financial agenda. They say, if I'm going to support you, hey, as they're talking about, how do you say it?
Quid pro quo.
Yeah, whatever it is. But the bottom line is they say, if you want something from me, I want something for you. And if you want my vote, I want a financial transaction that is going to make it worth my vote. Unfortunately, when they deal with black folks, they try to hit us up with emotion. They want to keep us away from the financial transactions. They want to focus us on community. They want to focus us on nonprofits. They want to focus us on the areas that don't cost much. And then they want to redirect the dollars away from us because they got you. It doesn't cost any money to say we want to get rid of Trump. Well, why do we want to get rid of Trump if the other party is not supporting our agenda? Because guess what? If you have no agenda, it does not matter who is the president. I'll give you an example. And I'll say this and I'll just go over it real quick. President Obama was probably one of the best presidents to ever come in and be a president in America. If you look at America, he took this country when it was headed down the tubes, and he did the right things for America. We as black people were so enamored about having a black president, we voted on emotion. We didn't vote with an agenda. And since there were great things, and we obviously benefited from stemming and turning the tide for America as a whole, the opportunities for black America in reality did not materialize as well as they could have when we had President Obama in, because we had no agenda. They worked us on emotion. They did not work us on a financial agenda. And that's what happens, and that's been happening since the 60s, is keep black folks on an emotional roller coaster, keep them focused on the non-transactional issues, and then we will get their vote for nothing.
So from Brian Harris' point of view, an agenda, a black agenda. If we were going to create one right now in this room as we speak, how would we go about doing it?
Well, again, this is a capitalist society. It will always be a capitalistic society. You must have businesses, and anything that's put together should focus in the black community of rebuilding and revitalizing the black economic structure.
So that's one bullet point that you would put on this agenda. I'm trying to like narrow it down,
Yes.
and drill down and say, if we're creating a black agenda now, and we want to put 3 bullet points on what the agenda should speak to.
Okay, and I'll tell you, when I talk about that, the major one I say to people that we don't talk about is black folks. Richard, who is the biggest redistributor of wealth in America?
Probably the federal government.
Absolutely. The federal government takes our taxes and gives it back. But when you look at procurement in America, we're 13% of the populace. But probably, again, less than 1% of procurement is done by the federal government to black-owned businesses. If you look at the Department of Transportation, if you look at the SBA, right now, we need to go back and talk about something that people used to cringe about, quotas. We need to stop people from talking about black people as minorities, as diversity. And we need to say, it's time we focus back like we did on black people and getting our fair share of the opportunity in America. We're not asking for handouts, but right now, we're being locked out because many of the policies that are in place today are designed to keep black businesses on the sideline. So to me, the candidate who will come in and say, I'll fix the existing processes so that black businesses have at least an equal opportunity. But guess what? We're owed more than an equal opportunity to win and succeed with all of the dollars that run through the federal government today. It would be a massive change in the black economy if more of the federal dollars from the existing procurement flowed into the black community and black businesses.
How's it been held up now? I mean, what's blocking it from coming now?
He who owns the road sets the rules. And I talk a lot about an example being new market tax credits. It sounds very good and was designed so that they would put more funds, they would give more opportunities in economically depressed areas. But when they designed the process, they utilized CDCs, we talked about this last time, which are 98% white. And the way they have set up the criteria, they can still utilize people that look like them, high five that they're helping the area, but all they're doing is accelerating gentrification. If you look at NDOT, they like to talk about their increased diversity, but when you look and peel back, less than 1% right now of black businesses are having any opportunities because the numbers have been skewed. We've been told that we cannot measure anymore by race. We have to go back and say, yes, you can. If you can measure veterans, if you can measure women, if you can measure the disabled, why can't you measure us? So we just have to come in and say, here's how you change the system so that it's more fair than rigged, to make sure that we, I call it, celebrate our demise.
I don't think that's a great celebration when you're celebrating someone's demise.
But if you don't know you're celebrating your demise, you think you're celebrating good things. I'll tell you something. Now I'm going to jump to minimum wage. And this is a problem that I see. We're told to celebrate the increase of minimum wage. And there's a difference between a living wage and a minimum wage. I laugh a lot. No, I'm not laughing, I'm concerned. They think that the big businesses are concerned about increasing minimum wage. When you increase it across the board, they win, because they drive out small black businesses who can barely afford to survive now. When you say you have to have the same minimum wage as Walmart, they're laughing. They're saying we can move this around, but we have now reduced your competitive edge and opportunity. And a lot of times in our community, they talk about the increase of minimum wage like it's going to be a great boom to the black community. But let me tell you, there's this little trigger called inflation that will offset minimum wage every time. We need a living wage, you're right. But we need people to understand there's a difference between living wage and minimum wage. A company that is a multi-billion-dollar company, they should have a living wage requirement that should be much higher than a mom and pop shop who can barely have one employee. Then you would see the growth of small businesses. Right now, we're celebrating again the death of small business, but nobody speaks out, because the people that are brought out, they're politicians, celebrities, pastors, and nothing against any of them, but they don't really understand economics.
So let me unpack that, because you're talking about multi-million-dollar corporations raising the minimum wage. There will be such a great impact on them versus the small business owner. Because what we're saying is, like, a living wage versus a minimum wage. The minimum wage increase will hurt someone. So small business, and that wage go up, and then their labor costs go up, and how would that impact them?
But they're going to go out of business, because that mom and pop who can barely afford one or two, if they're putting $15 an hour, then they're going to go out of business. But guess what? If you take that Amazon and say, you know what, you're paying hardly any taxes. You're paying, $15 an hour. Maybe you need to spend 25 or 20 hours as your living wage, because you've hit this side of the market where you're that big. I'll give you a good example. San Francisco. San Francisco has a minimum wage of $15, and everybody that has minimum wage still can't afford to live in San Francisco.
That's the most expensive place to live, and to survive there on a minimum wage
of $15 an hour.
Well, it's still, I don't think that's attainable in San Francisco, because the cost of living is so extremely high there.
Inflation, and that's what will happen as we continue to look at minimum wage as living wage. There are two different types, because here's the thing, minimum wage used to allow you to bring your son, your daughter, that nephew to come in and get work experiences. They didn't have the opportunities, and they shouldn't have been paid at a living wage. They're living with somewhere else. There's a minimum wage that goes there. I told you, it's a difference, and unfortunately, once again, the lines have been blurred because it sounds good, and because the people that are talking to our politicians don't really understand our agenda. And unfortunately, they got it wrong, but nobody's saying you got it wrong.
I did a little research while I'm here, and I pulled up the minimum wage, and it says it was actually started in 1938 because of the Fair Labor Standards of that time. And President Franklin created something just to get us through that Great Depression. So it was actually started, and I'm looking and doing some research, in 1933, the minimum wage was 25 cents an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The time of inflation changed that as well, but I just remember And correct me if I'm wrong, I remember minimum wage was actually just a wage to get you started in the workforce, not to be a permanent wage for you, just to get you introduced into the workplace and then and move out and move through it and go in advance. It was just enough to get you started. That was fair and move forward. Like I said, it came out of the Fair Labor Standard Acts of 1938. So it's not, I mean, when we say minimum wage versus living wage, minimum wage now, the definition I think becomes living wage.
But there lies the problem, because
the lines are just become blurred.
Let me give you an example. Walmart, which makes billions and billions of dollars, they should be paying a living wage. The fact is, in many areas, Walmart people were ever able to apply for welfare because they could not afford to live there. Yet, this is a corporation that is making billions and billions of dollars. They should not be paying minimum wage. They should be paying a living wage. But on the same sense, you have a small restaurant, mom and pop restaurant, with one employee, two employees. If theirs is going up that high, they're going to go out of business because they're not making that kind of money. There's a difference between living wage and minimum wage. But I want to kind of digress and go back, because what we're talking about again is politicians treat us, they treat us like a nonprofit. Let me tell you something, and this goes back to tell you a little bit about what's going on when we talk about transactional and we talk about why. Today's politicians look at numbers. Numbers drive everything that they decide to do and why. And they employ a ton of consultants. And yes, most of those consultants do not look like you and me. So when they go out and they craft a questionnaire, they don't necessarily craft the questionnaire to get the real ideology and beliefs of the black community. I went back when they say to get rid of Donald Trump. It's because if you go out and do a poll, you can make a poll say what you want it to say. Many of you have not heard, there was the black census that was done recently. And again, the black census seems to go a lot closer to my beliefs than I want to get rid of Donald Trump as my number one issue. They say we need we need economic agendas that make sense. If you look at the way everything's been couched, all of the Democratic people talk the same thing. Well, they want to give money to the HBCUs. It's kind of like one says something and they jump on, which giving money to the HBCUs is great. Great idea. But then they ignore, I talked about the fact of looking at the way procurement happens in the federal government, changing the allocation of money, access to capital, looking at the SBA, because a lot of times we see these success stories about small black businesses and they put that all over, they post it around, but when you look at the percentage of dollars that come out of the SBA that go to black businesses, is continuing to fall. When we talk about ideas, to me, take the money that is going to SBAs away from Bank of America. Take it away from Wells Fargo. Put it in historically black banks. Put together some triggers that incent the loaning to go to small businesses and to go to small black businesses instead of doing what we do now, which is business as usual.
I agree with that. I mean, the Small Business Administration and the loans that's out there, they're designed for small businesses. And the procurement part of it is that how it's allocated and where it's coming from. It does matter, because if you go in there and you try to get these loans and you don't qualify for a reason you think you should qualify, you're not. I mean, those are some of the hang-ups that you're having and the frustration. I give you an example. You go through a process where you're trying to get a loan and one loan officer tell you one thing and you wait moments later and call back and you get a different thing entirely from someone else. So these are the things that we're talking about, where we get misinformation based upon what? It's based upon the fact that you really don't know what our needs are, or to give you that example that I just gave you, where you have two loan officers give you two loan questions. I think the question should be simplified enough that you should get the same answer no matter who you go to. And those are the frustrations that you run into. I mean, I've just given you these examples, but that money is out there, and how it's getting to us does matter, and where it's coming from when the government decides what institution to give them. Give the allocation, the money to be allocated from. We still know we have to go through a process. I think it should be one simplified process, and that money should be released quicker, faster, so we can get it done and we can get it to work for what we need it to work for.
Absolutely. And as I said, these are things that are transactional. These are things that can be done that have a direct improvement in the economic life of black businesses and black people. Again, stop giving me high-level stuff. Yes, give some money to the SBCUs. Yes, do other issues, but let's talk about where the real money is, and stop giving me the high, okay, we're going to put X amount into grants, but the grants won't be for black people. It'll be minorities. It'll be other people. See, a lot of times what concerns me is there is a direct correlation, again, from consultants to figure out even how to word things when they talk about black people. Instead of talking about black people now, it's people of color. People of color, diversity, all of those are acceptable tags, because the politicians stay away from talking about issues specifically for the black community. And it's a shame, because they will talk about issues specifically for the Jewish community. They will talk about items specifically for the LGBT. They will talk about items specifically for other groups. They'll talk about immigration. But when it comes to talking about things for black groups, they don't seem to want to talk specifically about things that will directly, positively affect our group. And we are not holding them accountable. We are not saying, without our agenda, you won't get our vote and you won't win.
That's why I think to get that collective voice so we could be heard. Because these things are important. They're important to me, and they're important to the next generation and the following generation. This is 2020. We're still hung up on some of the things that we've seen a very long time ago when it comes to that's always projected as social injustice. That's understandable, and we have to get that right as well. But economics, we're just losing out. I mean, that tag that you mentioned before, Brian, was 2053, the black wealth. What year did you project?
2053, they say that black America will have no wealth as a group. That means there'll be a couple of billion or two around. Oprah will be either dead or closely there. There are a lot of the people there will be gone. So they're saying, yeah, there'll be a couple of billionaires. There'll be obviously the millionaires. There will be black people working, making good money. But when you talk about wealth, generational wealth, ownership of properties and businesses, black people are in trouble, and they say we will have no wealth. The good thing is to look at this. The war on drugs resulted in young black people disproportionately being incarcerated during the time when they should have been generating wealth. They have no Social Security. And so all of these factors come into play. And guess what? The persons that will probably most likely hire and give opportunities will be black-owned businesses. Everything that comes back to reducing crime, to reducing black-on-black crime as a whole, poverty, really comes back to recreating and strengthening the black economy, i.e. the black businesses.
It's very important. 2053 with 2020, do the math. You know, we have to get excited about this yesterday. and get moving on it now. And we are in a political season right now, and this is a very important voting season.
Absolutely.
A lot of reasons on both sides. But looking at going back to the black census, and just to think we want, if you're Democrat and you want just to defeat Donald Trump and that's it, I mean, what's next after that?
Yeah. Well, that's
what's next after that? Because I'm going down here and I glanced over it, and the black census just said that the majority of blacks feel disenfranchised.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying we feel disenfranchised. It's not about Trump. In independent, the majority of black people consider themselves to be independent. Like I said, one of the things that I am going to ask every candidate is, how many dollars are you spending on your campaign in black businesses, i.e. everything from print to media to where you get your food and everything. What's your percentage? Because if a candidate can't tell me that on the money he owns, how am I ever going to believe he has a real agenda when it comes to black folks? We have to basically start to demand right now that they show us that they have a good faith belief in economics right now. Because folks, we're about to watch $10 billion come through America and very little will come into our community. And that's a shame because, again, they want our vote. And our vote costs something. I had just recently, I had one of the candidates person state, we're media. They said, oh, he just wants a transaction. No, I want transactions for all of my black media. I want us to get paid like everybody else. Don't think that we need to come in here and do your work for free while you pay for billboards, while you pay for print, while you pay everybody else. You think our services are not worth the transaction that others are. That's why we say they treat us like a non-profit when you look at the political stage here. And we need to demand that they walk the talk, that they spend their money in black businesses while we are in this political arena now. Don't wait till the last minute to give some crumbs to the black community simply because people started to call you out. If you haven't been doing it now, early, then you're basically a hypocrite. You're basically just trying to throw us enough crumbs. It's kind of like the chicken dinner. You came in the last minute, you wanted to give us a chicken dinner for your vote.
And, talking about politics is big business, but they treat us like a non-profit. One of the ways we can get them to hear us is through the independent black voters.
Absolutely.
Broadcasts like this, podcasts and things like this, taking this information and just sharing it with one another so we can get them to at least hear what, we need to be heard about what we're talking about because this is very important. And $10 billion, that's a lot of money coming through. I mean, I know black-owned newsprint, black-owned print media, social media,
black
consultants. So, for that not to be happening, it's a disservice.
Absolutely. I'll give you something, and you said something, we have to be the people that demand it. I need you all. If you're part of the Independent Black Voters Group, we thank you. We need you to go out and get 10 more friends and get them to join. We have 1,400 members. We need to have 14,000. Then we need to have 140,000. Because when we create a voice like this voice will be heard. If you like what we're talking about, share this with your friends. Tell them to listen because we've got a lot of information to tell you that is hopefully helping you to know what's going on. The Independent Black Voters, our vote is not free. And for all those who are listening, hats off to some of our honorary sponsors here because we want to know there are black businesses out there. The write-up, Our Urban Voice. Available in 5 states. It's black owned. Are your politicians buying any ad space there? Hats off to Tommy Williams, Tomco. He's out of the Midwest with 13 radio stations.
Black owned.
Are they buying ads from him? Hats off to Jay King, the president of the Black Chamber of California in Sacramento. He has a radio station, black owned. Are the politicians spending money for advertising with these folks? And the list goes on and on. Where you spend your dollars matter. If we don't demand that the politicians walk the talk now, how am I ever going to believe that they're going to do it once they have they won the election?
I think it stops. I mean, show some good faith and good favor. You know, utilize these companies. There's more out there. Let us see those coming through the airwaves and on the print media when we're going out to hear you talk and you're coming in for the census. And I'm looking at all the pamphlets, and I like to see pamphlet was produced by this company, you know, and I know it's black owned. So that's a lot. $10 billion. I just can't get over that number. That's a staggering number. And I'm sure the next election cycle would probably double or triple.
And folks, that's just the presidential. When you put all the local and you put everything else across,
wow,
there is a crazy amount of money, and it's all being directed away from the black community as everything else is.
Well, Brian, we covered a lot. I mean, it looked like I'm looking at the clock and it's getting close to our time to leave, but this was a great topic. I mean, we didn't get everything covered that we'd like to, and maybe we can revisit some of this another time. But I'm looking forward to the next show, and we did cover a lot of things. Those who stayed with us, we appreciate it, and the ones that heard us, I mean, share what we're doing, and let's get this moving. And we're only like what 8.5, 9 months out from the next big voting. Locally also, that's where the difference is made on the local channel.
And join us out for the 4th annual 2020 Black Las Vegas Food Festival Block Party. It will be just before early voting, and yes, we did that for a reason. We look to have 20,000 people strong out with a message that, guess what? The shirt says, listen, my vote, my agenda. We must have an agenda, or it doesn't matter who's in the Oval Office.
That's great. That's the Food Festival, October 24th. But Brian, before we leave, let's thank the rest of our sponsors again on the ones that made it possible for us to be here. Is Ultimate Financial Tax and Insurance Services, creating a strategy to keep money in your pocket. It can be reached at 702-875-6293. MyMobile. Save money and create value. Free technology reviews for MyMobile. And last but not least, we have 2 more. Clark County Heating and Cooling. Summer's coming. PM specials available with this group. That can be reached also 708-805-3819. And Black Book Media. We're reaching our community with programs like this one, Independent Black Voters, The Bob Show, The Black Book, and also the Black Las Vegas Food Festival, which we just talked about, 2020. It's going to be happening October 24th. Hey guys, it's been great. See you next time that we get behind the mic, and we'll come up with something interesting to talk about. If you're out there, give us some ideas.
Yeah, next Thursday.
Like Texas, or type us some things that you like for us to talk about, so we can get that show developing, and we'll bring it back out to you. Yep. Thank you for listening, and can't wait to see you again. Be safe there.
Peace out.